My spirited sisters enthusiastically suggested that I rent out my vacation home for some extra income, so I did. When I refused, their husbands joined in the fun and are now facing charges. Today, my lively parents decided to have a barbecue, which is what older people do, right? I politely declined because I really don't like my two spirited sisters, their husbands, or their children. My wife and I are childless, and my parents are very supportive. Long story short, we went. When we arrived, there were about 20 people there. My sisters and their husbands were already enjoying a few drinks, and my mother was doing her best to keep the nieces and nephews, ages 7 to 11, under control. My dad had retired to the hot tub area of the pool with a small cooler full of beers. My wife and I had the opportunity to chat with a variety of people, eat some food, and enjoy a refreshing frozen margarita. My sisters and their husbands were a little tipsy, but still full of energy. They teased us a bit, saying we were late, not in our swimsuits, and spoiling the mood, but it was all in good fun. It was a typical suburban summer get-together, and about 45 minutes in, two of the kids ran up to a neighbor standing next to the pool and gave her a friendly push. She stumbled in, but luckily didn't fall. So she only got half wet, which was great. She was obviously very unhappy about it, but didn't make a scene. She just walked over to where her parents were, grabbed their towels, dried herself off, and left her sisters and Bills. It was all so much fun.
This is your story channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please join us to stay updated with more real stories happening around you.
It was all so much fun. A little later, I was standing a few feet away from the pool, chatting with someone, when I saw 3 of the kids running full speed towards me out of the corner of my eye. Obviously, I was next. Not that it's hard to outsmart young kids, but I just jumped out of the way at the last second. All 3 of them ran into the pool at full speed. Most of the other guests, including my wife and I, started laughing, but their mothers, who, as I said, were pretty good-looking, absolutely freaked out. 2 of the kids couldn't swim, even though they were in swimsuits. Since I wasn't wearing a swimsuit, I stepped back from the pool and let the others fish the kids out. They were screaming like they'd lost a limb. At that point, all hell broke loose. The 4 parents, who were a little tipsy, were yelling at everyone, especially me, for almost letting their kids drown. They also said that 2 of the kids had videotaped the prank with their parents' iPhone, which was now at the bottom of the pool. One of my brothers jumped into the pool to try to retrieve the phones, but his BMI and BAC made it impossible. No one else volunteered to help, which was no surprise since my sisters were still complaining to everyone. I reminded my sisters that it was their job to take care of their children, and if anything had happened to them, it would have been their responsibility, not mine. There were some pretty strong words on both sides, but everyone was just having a good time. My wife and I left after the other Bill fell over and hit his face while yelling at us. Now they're saying I should have let the kids push me into the pool and have their fun and ruin my phone. I'd like to add that Dad, of course, never got out of the hot tub. Relevant comments, thoughts from OOP. I realized they were just kids having a good time. The fact that they thought it was okay is more of a reflection on their parents than on them. It's nice to see my parents and their neighbors, but I really don't like my sisters or their husbands. They don't hide their envy of us, and they're just tiresome to be around. This is more about why UP doesn't care about some of his family. It's more like oil and water. I've never been close to my sisters. They're 8 and 10 years older than me, and I don't have much in common with their husbands either. They're all great guys, but we just have different priorities. I know the 4 of them are a little jealous of our lifestyle. Both sisters are stay-at-home moms, and both husbands make good money. One makes significantly more than I do, but both my wife and I have careers. We don't have kids, and we're much more responsible with our money. That has allowed us to have more investments and take more expensive vacations. My wife and I are very responsible with our money, and we don't have to deal with the mess of kids' stuff in our cars or the hassle of driving them places. We don't have to put up with any drama from the sisters or their husbands, but they do get a little petty sometimes. Overall, my wife and I just don't enjoy their company, which is why I wanted to skip the get-together. My wife is a glass-half-full kind of person, and she's usually happy to see them. Hopefully your wife won't feel guilty about going next time. That's probably the only positive thing that comes out of this. My wife is much more tolerant and forgiving of my siblings than I am, but from what she said on the way home, I think she's had enough of them, too. Your dad sounds great. Yeah, my dad is very laid back. He likes to be around people, and he used to be in sales, so he likes to see people having fun. He's definitely enjoying retired life now. He and two other guys were just sitting there watching the show. Mom is cool too, but the situation upset her kids. Okay, the kids are fine. When I left, they were inside watching TV. I think it's 7, 9, 10, 10, and 11. The middle three were playing kamikaze with me, and I'm pretty sure it was the 11-year-old. She's usually the ringleader, so I was egging her on. You phrased the part about your parents having a barbecue in an interesting way. I had to cut it down to fit the character limit, but that's how they are. My parents are social and like to have people over. They have the classic great for entertaining house and always come up with a reason to get together. They were really looking forward to having everyone over for the 4th of July, but one of my sisters and her family were on vacation. So it turned out to be a fun 4th of July party, complete with flags, red, white, and blue decorations, a barbecue, a margarita machine, and more. The kids were promised sparklers, and my nieces and nephews were the only ones there. The neighbors are all older, like my parents. OOP is not voted a whole update post August 17, 2023, almost a month later. First of all, my parents tell me that my nieces and nephews are all good swimmers and that they use the pool all the time. The 7-year-old is a beginner, but he loves the water. My sister just said they couldn't swim, so I'd look bad. To be fair, none of the kids are allowed in the deep end, which is where they fell in. It was the two 10-year-olds and the 9-year-old who tried to push me into the pool after we left. The party ended on a pretty sour note, but that won't stop us from having a great time next time. My drunk brother-in-law, who face-planted while yelling at me, had to go to the emergency room and get stitches in his face. He was too drunk to drive, but he'll be back on his feet in no time. Dad took him with him and he was not happy. That evening, my sister started a group text and shared some comments that were perhaps a bit harsh. Her husbands joined in. We decided to block the 4 of them. My mom called me upset about what they had said. She and my dad were in the chat, and I understand their perspective. My parents insisted that my sisters bring their kids over the next day, Sunday, to straighten things out and set some ground rules. Mom's wording was great. The result was a contrite, if unenthusiastic, apology from my siblings over my mom's phone. I'm glad my wife was with me when they called. Harsh stares prevented me from saying what I wanted to, but I simply told them that I thanked them and that we did not feel the need to discuss it further. I thought things were settled, so I unblocked them that evening. I got a text from one of the bills telling me the phones cost $4x and asking when I'd pay for them. I replied, "What the hell?" I never took a screenshot of his text and forwarded it to my parents with a note that we were done with this nonsense. We're going to have no contact with sisters and spouses, and we're not going to invite them to any more holidays or get-togethers. If they are there, I'll block them again. At this point, the situation really heated up. Dad called them and gave them a piece of his mind. He told them that the grandchildren weren't welcome in the house indefinitely, since my mom was providing free babysitting on a regular basis. That got them pretty rattled. He also banned them from using the cottage and told them that my wife and I actually own it, not him and mom. This totally freaked them out, and it was so funny to watch. Both of my sisters' families use the place a lot, including having their friends over for weekend getaways. This was very out of character for my parents, but they clearly had it. And for the record, I never wanted my sisters to know that we owned the place. We bought it for my parents, who always wanted a place in the mountains, and keeping the ownership secret was just a way to avoid drama with my siblings. A few days later, my sisters and their husbands came to our house unannounced to apologize in person. We were having dinner and they left a note. One sister also called me at work, but I sent her to voicemail. We decided that no contact was best for the indefinite future and haven't interacted with them in over 3 weeks. Personally, I'm done. They can go on with their lives, and I'm excited to see what life will be like without them. It's been less than a month, and I'm thrilled to say that blocking them has made our lives so much more peaceful. I hadn't realized how much ongoing drama they create, but it's not toxic. They're not bad people. They're just a little annoying and petty. And as for the weekend house, I'm happy to let them enjoy it. It's technically ours, but my parents bought it for us. They control it and decide who uses it when they're not around. We pay all the operating costs and taxes, which is great. This whole situation has actually given us a chance to think about what we're going to do with the property when my parents get older. I was thinking about taking over the management and the weekends and the upkeep, but now we know we're just going to sell it. And when we want to go to the mountains, we'll just rent an Airbnb. Oops, parents. Yeah, my parents aren't stupid. They're pretty laid back, though. Very live and let live. I think they'll relax soon, but that's their choice. We're going to take a break from family events for a while. My sisters are probably worried that I'm keeping them from using the cabin, but that's up to my parents until they're older. This puts an end to one of my sister's fantasies of building a compound when we inherit the property, which I've known about and ignored for some time. Normally, the lots up there only have one area that can be built on. This property is unique because it's at the end of a road, which allows for a lot of space. I can't wait to see what they'll build. Maybe 3 houses with stunning views. They're not really sorry, but I understand that they want something in return. I'm okay with that. Their apology isn't sincere, but I don't plan on discussing the cottage with them anytime soon. It's really my parents' decision. I technically own it and pay all the expenses, but I bought it for them and gave them day-to-day control. They're good people who always wanted a place for the family, but there's no way they could have ever bought it themselves. I could afford to buy it for them because I've been financially fortunate. I save and invest like a demon. I even got a massive bonus the same year I sold my house and moved in with my now wife. I don't mind my parents letting my siblings use the house, and I love my sister's discomfort at finding out that I could afford to buy the place and let my parents use it while never mentioning it to them. Dad even changed the lock code when they went upstairs last week, so now only he, Mom, my wife, and I have it. I'm happy to say that as far as Mom watching the kids, she goes to each sister's house once a week, and sometimes Dad joins her for a day of fun with the kids. When school starts, she's going to pick up each setup from school once a week on separate days and spend the evening with them, which is such a great idea. She says the 5 of them together stress her out, but separately they're fine. Mom and Dad have both expressed their happiness with the new rhythm, and they're enjoying the peace and quiet. I have a hunch that they were ready for a change, and the pool party incident was just the catalyst. On a lighter note, I heard that Ida's WAP's post was removed. The other sub's moderator mentioned that it was due to property damage, which is all part of the adventure. I'm still scratching my head. The phone's being ruined, I guess, is a result of the ridiculous update on August 26, 2023, just 9 days after the previous post. Well, it's been an eventful few days. I thought the situation had reached a boiling point before, but that was a far cry from what's happened this week. To help you understand, I'll give you some financial context. My parents have never been good at saving money. I've been doing their taxes for years, so I know pretty much everything about them financially. Their house is paid for and they have minimal debt, which is great. They haven't saved much for retirement, but that's okay. They both get Social Security, which is wonderful. Dad gets a solid pension and they have some savings. There's no treasure chest in the basement, but that's okay. I bought their current car for them when they retired, a retirement gift, so they could have something nice to drive. It was the first car they hadn't leased in probably 20 years, and it was a great gift. My sisters are convinced that people are rolling in money and that our parents are leaving. They have everything because I don't need any more money. So they've never bothered to save. It turns out that my oldest sister and her husband, who have 3 children, have been living beyond their means for some time and are in financial trouble. They've maxed out their credit cards and are behind on their car leases, with one about to be repossessed. He used to brag about making X amount of money a year, but it turns out he's making half that. She confessed all this to Mom on Tuesday because they need a loan and this was a WTF moment for Mom and Dad, for the past 3 years, instead of staying at the vacation house regularly. She's actually been renting it out once a month or so and pocketing the money. We're talking an extra $2,000 for a weekend and at least $4,000 for a week. Since she's been cut off from using the place, she's already had to cancel one group, and she's afraid they're going to lose everything. My parents aren't in a position to help her. My other sister knew she was renting out the place, but of course she didn't say anything. I guess she did the same thing, because I went up there once to drop off an ATV I'd been working on, and there was a family there that claimed to be staying with my sister and her family, and that they had gone into town for something. I let it go at the time because I figured she'd rented the place out to some friends. But I've always wondered. I found out through my parents, who are pretty stressed out about it. Mom more than Dad, who's mostly just upset about everything. I know Dad feels betrayed, and I imagine he's embarrassed that he's not in a position to help his daughter out, but he did reiterate that as far as he's concerned, the girls won't be using the cottage anytime soon. My parents let me know what was going on because they figured my sisters would come after me next, and they were right. On Thursday, my sisters came to our house again, this time without their husbands, and waited outside the door until I got home. I had to choose between arguing with them in public and then making a scene if I went in without them, or letting them in. So I let them in. My sisters had a great story about why they needed to use Mountain Place again right away. They said I had been a bit of a shitty brother and that I should step up and plan to pay for their kids' college tuition because that's what family does. I let them tell their side of the story and then offered some perspective based on what my parents had told me. The conversation took a wild ride, with moments of denial, tears, and some lively banter. I can still hear the echoes 2 days later. I may have said some things that were a little strong, but they were all true. After about an hour, they finally left. I jumped in the shower and collapsed on the couch. When I got up, my wife was home and her first words were that she had to block more phone numbers because my sisters were blowing up our phones with new numbers. People were texting me yesterday asking me to call, and I'm sure my sisters told them some version of what happened, but I'm not ready to rehash it yet. I'm usually a pretty energetic person, but this drama has got me down. Today I had just enough energy to drive up to the cottage and padlock the front gate. I'm the only one with a key, so I'm sure this will keep my siblings from visiting. They'd probably die trying to walk 400 yards uphill to get to the house. Here are some recent updates. Update 3, posted September 12, 2023, 5 weeks after the last update. I have another update regarding Cluster F. This is my extended family. After what's been going on for the past 2 weeks, my sisters came to see me, and my mom and dad told me that they were done managing the vacation house. It sounded like the sisters were pressuring them to let them use the place again. Basically, my parents were handing over the responsibility of the place to me and telling me that it was my problem from now on. Up until then, they'd been keeping track of who was using it and taking care of the maintenance, replacing worn items, and so on. Anyway, they decided they didn't want to be in the middle of it. While I don't blame them, I am disappointed because the place was supposed to be something for them to enjoy and hang out in, and they use it regularly. I've never minded my sisters and their families using it because I thought it was my parents' decision, even though it belongs to me. But now my parents only have access when I'm involved, which changes the dynamic of the place. I've taken several steps to secure the place, including locking the gate. It has a heavy-duty chain and the best lock I could find, so I know it's well protected. I also did a full reset on all the door keypads and created new codes, which is always fun. The security cameras that were installed yesterday are pretty cool. The installer convinced me to get a high-resolution one that looks out over the valley. The system cost more than I expected, but I'm thrilled with the peace of mind it gives me. The installer also put up signs around the property saying that the place is being monitored by video, which I think is great. I also installed a heavy-duty lock on the water drain valve, which I'm sure will save the day if we lose the keys. I haven't told anyone but my wife that the water is locked off, and again, only we have the keys. Last week I got separate calls in my office from the 2 husbands trying to convince me to let them use the house as usual. The older one had gone upstairs with some friends for a men's meeting but couldn't get in because of the gate lock. He was pretty upset and embarrassed about being locked out, but I told him I was sure he would have broken the lock if he could. Throughout the call, he alternated between assertive and defensive, even threatening to remove the gate from the ground. He also admitted that they had rented it to friends and needed the money. I suggested they refund their guests' money and he agreed. I wish I had recorded the conversation, but I'm not familiar with the process on an office phone. The other bill sounded like he was being forced to call by my sister, which was pretty funny. He didn't put up a fight when I told him not to plan on ever using the place again, which was great. Anyway, I told them they couldn't use the place and not to ask again. At this point, I'm considering selling the cottage because my wife and I don't use it enough to justify keeping it. And with the way things are going, it's not like there will be any family reunions there in the near future. I mentioned selling it to my parents and they basically said, whatever. I would more than double my money if I sold it. The place has 3 lots with stunning views and is at the end of a private road. But I'll probably wait a while to sell. The decision to sell now would be an emotional one. My sisters and I are not on speaking terms at this time, and I have no plans to initiate contact. I don't know the status between them and my parents, and I choose not to. On the plus side, we spent an evening with my parents last week, went to a new restaurant, which was nice. No one brought up any of these issues. Mom did catch us up on the nieces and nephews. She's spending time with them in their homes. I apologize that this update may not be filled with laughter or drama, but that's life. Update post for October 16th, 2023. A few people have asked for an update, and I'm happy to share. I'm hiring a fantastic guy to manage and oversee the vacation home. He's a local guy who also takes care of his parents and manages several properties, including some vacation rentals and weekend getaways, just like ours. He has access to my camera feeds and physically checks in on the property every week or two. I think he might have the best job in the mountains. He gets paid to drive around with his dog, walk the property, and hang out on people's decks whenever he feels like it. He also has a camera feed from a house near the start of the private road that takes pictures whenever a vehicle passes by. He gets paid an amazing $450 a month, plus he does basic maintenance and repairs on an hourly basis. He's also friends with all the sheriff's deputies. I feel so much peace of mind knowing he's doing such a great job. He sends photos of his walks to everyone once or twice a week. I have to brag a little bit about my parents. I got all this from them at dinner tonight. They've been getting pressure from my sisters to demand that I open the cottage to everyone for Thanksgiving, which is a great tradition for the family, even if it's not for me or my wife. We've only gone once in 7 years, but my dad refused to bother me because he knew I'd say no. They came up with what I think is a great plan. They announced that they were organizing the Thanksgiving get-together, and if everyone split the cost up front, they'd rent an Airbnb in the mountains. Otherwise, they'd have Thanksgiving at their house or one of the sisters could host it. This caused a lively discussion among the sisters, with the middle sister in favor of doing the Airbnb, but the oldest sister having no money. The deadline for the Airbnb has passed, so it looks like Thanksgiving will be at my parents' house. We're not planning on being there, but we're excited to see how things turn out. My parents have asked us not to sell the house for now. They've decided that they'd still like to use it occasionally, but not until my sisters have settled into a new normal. And of course, they'd probably like it if everyone could get together there again in the future, but that's just not going to happen. I'd just as soon sell it and move on at this point. I'm open to keeping it if my parents use it from time to time, and it will be worth even more in the future. My wife and I have decided not to keep in touch with my sisters and their husbands. Both sisters called from new numbers on Google Voice and left messages insisting that I meet with them for our parents' sake to figure out how everyone can use the family vacation home. They also called my wife. I'm glad I was already in the habit of not answering calls if I didn't recognize the number. I honestly don't know if they're delusional or if they think they can bully me into giving them access, but I'm not going to let them. My parents tell me that the oldest sister and her husband are getting out of the leases on their SUV and big-ass truck and selling their jet skis and some other stuff they've never needed. That's going to be a real change for her. She's a bit of a show-off, and she's not going to be thrilled to be seen in something newer, smaller, and cheaper. My Bill's identity is deeply tied to his truck, and he even has a small tattoo of the trucking company's logo. That's one of the many reasons he and I have never hung out, but I'm excited to see what happens. Several people have suggested that I turn the cottage into an Airbnb, which I'm seriously considering. I'm not planning on doing that anytime soon, but I know it would make money. It would cause an incredible amount of family drama and stress on my parents, which is the last thing I want. It would also be a hassle to remove the personal things my parents have there. There is nowhere for that stuff to go, and there would be wear and tear on the place. I'm sure it would take some time, even with a manager, but it's just not worth it to me right now. Update post 5, November 27th, 2023. 1. 5 months later. Wrote most of this yesterday, but decided to wait to post it until I wasn't so tired of waiting. Didn't work. I'm still upset. Sorry if this rambles. So much has happened and I can't wait to share all the details with you. It's been a bit of a wild ride, but I'm excited to see how it all turns out. My brothers-in-law broke into my vacation home and, believe it or not, they were arrested. They're facing charges of burglary, destruction of property, and uttering threats. I don't plan on dropping the charges anytime soon, but I am open to discussing compensation for the damage they caused. They were still in jail on Saturday night, but I assume they're out by now. Things had calmed down, or so I thought. I haven't seen or heard from my sisters in over 6 weeks, but I'm sure they're fine. My parents went up to the house for a week and had a good time. David, the property manager I hired, has been doing a great job. He's already done some of the repairs I asked him to do, and I've given him a list of additional projects to work on. Every week he sends a photo or two of wildlife or a sunset to his clients. It makes me want to go up there. The Friday after Thanksgiving, my bills went to my vacation home. They used an angle grinder to cut through the chain on the driveway gate, damaging it. They tried the front door, but the lock set was broken and the door was pretty messed up. They finally got in through the utility floor door and a locked interior door. They also broke into the barn, but that's probably just because they were feeling adventurous. I'm not sure why they went through the front door, where they were met by sheriff's deputies, since David gets alerts from the camera system when there's activity. He saw what was going on and called the sheriff. According to David, the thieves tried to make a run for it, but the deputies weren't having it. Breaking into an empty house is a pretty serious thing up there, and usually it's meth heads who ransack the place and pawn everything. When they got arrested, they freaked out. We were talking about how they were going to beat the hell out of me, etc. Not smart to do that in front of the cops, David. The sheriff's office wanted to talk to us about what to do next, but we were spending the day with my wife's parents and had left our phones in the car so we could enjoy some vacation mode. The bills were all charged, which is exactly what I would have asked them to do. The bills called their wives from jail, and of course they freaked out. They called my parents, tried to call me, but were blocked. I tried to find a lawyer up there to arrange bail, but it's a rural area and it was a holiday weekend, so it wasn't easy. My older sister doesn't have any money and her credit cards are maxed out, so if they made bail, my middle sister would have had to pay for both men. I know they were still in jail on Saturday afternoon. We didn't check our phones until late Friday on the way home from the loss. There were a ton of calls and messages from my mom, dad, David, and the sheriff's department. Talk about ruining a great day. I was in such a good mood until I looked at my phone. My wife was reading the texts and listening to the messages and reading them to me. By the time we got home, I had some idea what was going on. I put my brain back into thinking mode and tried to get over my anger, but I failed. I called David to get the 411 on what had happened and how bad the damage was, and I ended up feeling even more angry. I ended Friday by calling the sheriff's department and telling them there was no misunderstanding. The bills had absolutely no right to be on my property, and I wanted to press charges. I didn't call my parents back. I barely slept. I waited until Saturday afternoon to call my parents. They were both pretty upset about everything, especially my mom. My sisters had convinced her that it was all a misunderstanding and that I should drop the charges. I refused, adamantly telling them there was no way I would do that until I spoke to a lawyer and was fully compensated for all the repairs. My mom was crying when we got off the phone, which made me feel like my dad was suggesting it was time for a complete standoff, but also said he thought they needed to pay for the damages. I haven't been out to the property yet, but I'll probably go soon and see the damage for myself. The photos are bad enough. I'm hoping to go tomorrow or Wednesday, but my job doesn't allow me to just wander off for non-emergencies. I've already left messages with 2 lawyer friends, asking them to recommend the right lawyers to go after my sisters and bills. I'm hoping to get a restraining order, and I have all the texts they sent me that might help. I'm seriously considering suing them for the money they made from renting the house, and I'm excited to see what effect that will have. The gloves are off, and I'm ready to move forward. Here are a couple of side notes. 1. Bills had no idea I'd hired someone to keep an eye on things, or that there were cameras there. My parents were aware, but chose not to inform me, knowing it would only cause drama between my sisters. There are clear signs on the property, including no trespassing and camera surveillance. 2. My wife has reached her limit. I completely understand and appreciate her patience. She finally had to let me know. She told me it's up to me how I deal with it, but that she felt they all needed to be taught a hard lesson. 3. Older Bill probably won't face any repercussions at work over this, but Middle Bill has a security clearance, so he might. I'm hoping this will be motivation for Middle Bill to pay for the damage himself right away. 4. David, the janitor, has an interesting background. I assumed he was friends with some of the deputies because they were all locals, but I was wrong. He was a big city cop for years, got shot in the line of duty, and decided to quit and move to where his parents had retired. He had some PTSD from the whole thing. His dog is a certified service animal and is with him most of the time. I know that law enforcement people tend to hang out together, and I guess that's how they became friends. 5. I'm not sure I can handle seeing or talking to these people again. I know it might conflict with my desire to make their lives as difficult as possible, but I'm curious to see what happens. Relevant comment? Many people have suggested that I should have been more direct about all of this from the beginning. I held back because it would have stressed out my parents. I'm not a fan of drama, but they are stressed now. My wife has decided to take a step back and focus on herself, so she won't get too involved. I'm sure she has her own ideas about the future of this place. I'm just speculating, but I think they were planning on using it for family vacations and renting it out again. According to David, the property manager, it's deer season through the end of the year, which is perfect. I know the Bills have used it in the past as a base camp for big group hunting weeks, so it's a great place. It sleeps quite a few people, so an event with friends could net them thousands of dollars. Again, I'm guessing here, but that would explain why they broke into the barn as well. I bought a 6-seat meal a few years ago, and they would want to use that. I'm happy to report that the incident did not result in any damage to the place, which has immense meaning to my father. The fact that they came with the intention of making amends is incredibly heartwarming, especially given the strong bond they have with him. Here is the latest update on December 6, 2023. I'm happy to report that 5 days later, on Saturday, December 2nd, 2023, I'm already feeling the positive energy flowing from this development. I'm excited to share that a lot has happened in the last 2 days. In short, I believe we've turned a corner on this journey. On Thursday afternoon, I received a signed letter from my 2 brothers-in-law and a cashier's check for $5,000. They apologized for the break-in and admitted it was wrong, and said the $5,000 was to pay for the damage and that they'd pay more if it cost more. They also promised to stay away from the cottage unless my wife and I specifically invited them. They asked that I do everything in my power to get the charges dropped as soon as possible because they could lose their jobs. They even agreed to a restraining order or whatever it took. There was more, all conciliatory. But that's the gist of it. To say it was a shock would be an understatement. It was a complete turnaround from her previous behavior. I had already scheduled a meeting with an attorney to discuss suing them for damages and exploring a restraining order. I called him to update him on the situation, and he agreed to meet with me at the end of the day instead of next week. He discouraged me from depositing the check, and we met for about 2 hours. He proposed a settlement and mutual release agreement involving all 4 of them, including the sisters and the Bills. He explained that while we might have a strong case, pursuing a lawsuit could take 2 years or more. There would be significant legal fees up front, and the money might not be available. However, he mentioned that we could keep the $5,000 if we didn't release her. He is working on the agreement, and it won't be ready until Monday. The agreement will include what is essentially the civil equivalent of a restraining order, which is great. I'd already asked my property manager to get a quote for repairing the damage, and I called him after the meeting to ask him to get me an estimate as soon as possible. He got it on Friday, and he thinks it will take about $4,000 to fix everything. The front door will be the most expensive part. On Friday, my attorney contacted each of the billers, explained our proposal, and advised them to get their own attorneys. They both agreed. The middle bill told him they could either afford to pay for the damages or pay for a lawyer, but not both. They felt that a lawyer wouldn't make a difference since they really had no defense for what they did. His biggest concern was whether the charges could be dropped. They're eager to move forward, and my attorney is working on a solution. He spoke with the prosecutor's office on Friday to discuss dropping the charges, got the name of the prosecutor, and left a message. He is confident that the charges will be dismissed because the bills are paid and they have no criminal record. He's a great lawyer and he's working on the best solution for me. He's super optimistic and says I should be ready to go in on Monday or Tuesday and tell the DA in person that I want everything dismissed. He's also advised me to continue to have no contact with the sisters and the bills, especially for the next 6 months, and that it will be really important to follow the terms of the agreement when it comes to future interactions with them. I'm thrilled that the bill has changed his mind because now he understands what's at stake, the legal fees and fines, and the possibility of up to 120 days in jail. And as I said, one of them has a security clearance for his job that could be in jeopardy. This is their Hail Mary pass to keep their normal lives. It's not a perfect solution to the situation, but it will get me past the legal and financial part of the show that I've been in for the last few months. I doubt I'll ever have a civil relationship with any of them again, and that's fine. What I want most at this point is to close this chapter, move on with my life, and never speak to any of them again. I'm exhausted from this situation, and my wife feels pretty much the same way. Getting the written apology was a huge moment for me. I didn't expect it, but apparently it means a lot to me. The money doesn't feel that important right now. I'll definitely take it, and I appreciate the kind words. My middle sister and her husband came up with the money, and the cashier's check is from the credit union of the company he works for. Once everything is signed, I'll make another update, probably just an edit to this post. I'm glad to be moving on. Writing these posts has helped clear my head, and the feedback has been really helpful. I'm very grateful for all the comments, insights, and support that everyone has provided. I really hope none of you ever have to deal with a situation like this. To be honest, when I finally got home Thursday night, I cried with relief, thinking that this might all be over. I won't discuss the settlement with my parents until it's signed by everyone. My sisters can bill if they want, but I won't. It's between me and them. Here's the latest update, December 7th, 2023. 5 days later, on Tuesday morning, I met with my lawyer, reviewed the agreement, and made a few minor changes. He then sent it to my sisters and brothers-in-law, including a requirement that they pay my attorney's fee, which is about $3,000. They weren't very happy about it, but they accepted it. They also tried to negotiate it away, but my attorney was firm. He told them that either they accepted it as is, or there would be no settlement at all. We would sue them for the money they made from renting the place. This would cover the wear and tear of renting it out, the cost of repairs from their break-in, emotional distress, lost income from having to deal with this, attorney fees, and whatever else we could. He also said that I would push hard with the DA's office to prosecute every charge. In short, they came in and signed. I wasn't there, but I'm told it was a pretty tense environment. Middle Bill seemed to be in charge, and at one point he told my 2 sisters to shut up or he would walk away from the whole thing. He made his own deal with us and the rest of them could all go. They even presented another cashier's check for $2,500, claiming it was all they had. The lawyer also told me that everyone was very cold and short with each other, but they all managed to hold it together long enough to sign and leave without making too much of a scene. I went to the cottage early yesterday to assess the damage and meet with the prosecutor. Seeing the damage made my blood boil, but I kept my cool. I was so upset that I was willing to do whatever it took to make things right. I tried taking a walk to clear my head, but it didn't work. I ended up calling a good friend who was kind enough to stay on the phone for over an hour and let me vent. He helped me focus on the bigger picture of putting this behind me and moving on with my life. I'm still not sure that's what I want to do, but I was able to relax and eat, which made me feel better. After lunch, I went to the DA's office without an appointment and had to wait a while, but I was able to meet with the assistant DA who's working on the case. The assistant DA was very understanding, and they told me that since I don't want to prosecute and the bills have already paid for the damages, they are willing to drop all the charges except for trespassing, which in this case will be a Class 2 misdemeanor. The bills will have to plead guilty and pay whatever fine the judge sets. I'm also told that if they fight the trespassing charge, or even so much as appear in public up there, it would go very badly for them. The fact that the bills didn't resist arrest really helped, and if they had, none of the charges would have been dropped. I also went by the sheriff's office to thank them for getting there so fast and everything. I wanted to thank the deputies personally, but I only talked to the dispatcher. I tried to meet with David, the property manager, but couldn't get a hold of him. A couple of notes. The agreement has a no-contact clause. Basically, if any of them show up where my wife or I are, or vice versa, whoever got the last one has to leave immediately. No contact except through attorneys or other mutually agreed upon third parties. They get to keep whatever they made from renting the vacation home. My big give is that unless I have tax consequences, which they will be responsible for, and we release each other from all other liabilities up to the present. There's more to it than that, but those are the highlights. My wife and I will be signing the agreement later today, and then I'll be focusing on other things, but I'm happy to talk about it. I hope this will be my last update on all of this, but I'll be sure to respond to comments if I can. As I mentioned before, reading Folky's thoughts and responses and writing about all of this has been incredibly helpful. It's been instrumental in helping me deal with this in a relatively healthy way. So thank you all again for your comments. I had a hard time not being vindictive, but now I'm glad I wasn't. If they cause more drama down the road, I'll probably regret it. But if they stick to the agreement, that won't happen. The family dynamic, like you said, is pretty much a thing of the past. I just told my parents that we're trying to work things out, nothing more. They may or may not agree with the way things are going, but I had to do what was best for my wife. I'm sure my sisters painted a slightly different picture, but that's just part of the dynamic. The agreement is really just a formalization of how things have been developing over the last few months. It may not have been the exact path my parents envisioned, but I'm thrilled with how things are shaping up. Have your sisters ever shown such a strong sense of entitlement? I don't remember them doing that, at least not in my direction. We weren't close, but we weren't enemies. In retrospect, they resented me when I bought a loft at 25 and they had met their future husbands by then. They didn't like it at all. Things got a little rocky when I met my wife, but we worked through it. They were a little surprised that I chose to be with someone from a wealthy family, especially since I was doing pretty well for myself. They even accused me of being elitist. When we got married, I moved in with my wife. Her apartment was close to where she was doing her fellowship, and I sold my loft. Our wedding was fancy but sensible, and the sisters were definitely jealous after that day. Their husbands were quite petty, and we began to minimize our involvement with them. The profit from selling the loft, being frugal, and not having a house payment allowed me to buy the vacation home for my parents. My parents were okay with hiding the fact that I owned it instead of them, because they knew my sisters would be bitchy about it and say I was using my wife's money, but I wasn't. Most of our finances are separate, which is great. It would definitely help that I didn't have a house payment until this whole thing started. I really thought we were doing well. Our daily lives are very different, and I can't pretend to enjoy being around them for more than half a day, but I didn't think they hated me. I knew that both sisters had become quite spoiled and entitled, but that wasn't my concern. I didn't have any real conflicts with my brothers-in-law either, just almost nothing in common with them. I guess that's a long way of saying I didn't know they were all like that. One last thought. My little fantasy at this point is that I never hear from them again.